I want you to close your eyes for a second. Well, don't close them if you're driving, but just imagine that moment where your heart stops. Maybe you were on the highway doing 70 and you looked down at your phone for just a split second, which I know we shouldn't do. And when you looked up, brake lights were right in your face.
Oh, yeah. It's that instant where time just, it seems to dilate. You slam the brakes, you swerve, the tires screech, and you're just waiting for the impact. You're waiting for the sound of metal crunching.
But then there's just silence. You're on the shoulder, you're breathing hard, your hands are shaking so bad you can't even grip the wheel, but there's not a single scratch on the car. You missed it by an inch.
That is such a universal human experience. It's the near miss. That crisis that was about to destroy everything and then, for some reason, didn't.
And what do we usually do in that moment? We take a deep breath, we might say a quick thank God, and then, 10 minutes later, we're back to worrying about what to make for dinner. We just delete the file. We move on.
We do. We have a terrible case of amnesia when it comes to our own survival.
Well, today we are fighting that amnesia. We're doing a deep dive into a text that is basically a cure for that forgetfulness. We're looking at Psalm 124. And honestly, digging into the research on this, I realized this isn't just some ancient poem. It's almost like a psychological framework for how to deal with trauma and gratitude.
It really is. It's a masterclass in what some scholars call the discipline of remembrance. And I know that sounds fancy, but it's actually a very gritty, practical way of looking at your life.
So, okay, set the stage for us. We're looking at Psalm 124. The source material says this is a song of degrees, or a song of ascents. I've heard that term before, but I've never really known what it meant practically. Is it just like a playlist title?
In a way, yes. But think about the context. 3 times a year, Jewish pilgrims would travel to Jerusalem for the major festivals. Now, we picture a road trip.
Yeah.
Snacks, AC, GPS. But back then, travel was terrifying.
Right. You're leaving your walled village. You're completely exposed.
Totally exposed. You're walking through bandit country. The terrain is rough, the heat is intense, and you are carrying supplies that make you a target. And you are literally ascending. You're climbing up from the lowlands to the heights of Jerusalem.
So these weren't just songs they sang to pass the time.
No, exactly. These were survival songs. When you sing Psalm 124 on that road, you aren't singing it from a comfortable armchair. You're singing it while looking over your shoulder. You're singing it because you know that making it to the destination is not guaranteed.
Wow. That changes the vibe immediately. It feels so much higher stakes.
So the psalm opens with this really interesting sentence structure. It says, "If it had not been the Lord who was on our side, now may Israel say. If it had not been the Lord who was on our side when men rose up against us."
You notice the repetition there.
Yeah, it says the same thing twice.
Yes.
If it had not been the Lord, why burn the word count? Well, in ancient Hebrew poetry, repetition is like a highlighter. But here it serves a dramatic purpose. It's capturing that feeling of breathlessness. Think back to that car accident you described. When you tell the story later, do you speak in perfect paragraphs?
No, not at all. You stutter. You say, I don't know what happened. I don't know how I missed him.
That's exactly what's happening here. The writer is starting this song with a kind of stutter of disbelief. If it hadn't been for God. It's the sound of someone who knows they should be dead.
That is chilling. And then he adds that little phrase, now may Israel say.
And this is a crucial instruction. This isn't a diary entry. It's a command to the whole community. He's telling the entire group, okay, everyone stop walking, look where we are. Now I want us all to say this together.
So it's like collective therapy. It's forcing everyone to acknowledge the shared danger.
And to acknowledge the what if. Psychologists talk about counterfactual thinking, imagining alternative realities. Usually that's bad for us. We imagine, what if I'd won the lottery? And it just makes us depressed.
Right. Or what if I had said that witty comeback and you stew on it for days?
But here, the counterfactual is used for gratitude. The text is forcing them to imagine the disaster that didn't happen. If God hadn't been there, what would the outcome have been?
And the text does not hold back on describing that outcome. It gets violent, fast. Verse 3, then they had swallowed us up quick when their wrath was kindled against us. Swallowed up quick. That sounds like a monster movie.
It's so primal. The Hebrew word implies being eaten alive. It's sudden. 1 minute you're there, the next you're gone. It speaks to how quickly things can just turn against us.
And then the metaphor shifts. We go from a beast eating us to water drowning us, verse 4. Then the waters had overwhelmed us. The stream had gone over our soul. Then the proud waters had gone over our soul.
This flood imagery is huge in the ancient world. The sea, the flood, these were symbols of pure chaos. You have to remember, they didn't have dams or, the Army Corps of Engineers,
Hmm.
a flood was an unstoppable force of nature.
It's interesting you say unstoppable. I was reading through the notes and I got stuck on that phrase, proud waters. It feels like a weird adjective for a river. A river doesn't have an ego. Why call it proud?
That caught my eye, too. It's a fascinating personification. By calling the waters proud or arrogant, the poet is attributing an attitude to the danger itself. It represents a threat that feels totally invincible.
So, like the problem is mocking you.
Precisely. Have you ever faced a situation, maybe a huge debt or a legal battle, a medical diagnosis, where the problem felt like it had the final say? It felt arrogant. It looked at you and said, I'm going to crush you, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Oh, absolutely. It feels like the universe is bullying you. You feel so small.
It isn't the proud waters. It's the feeling of being completely outmatched. And the psalm is asking us to be honest about that vulnerability.
Which is hard. We hate being vulnerable. We want to be the hero of the movie who roundhouse kicks the bad guy. But this text is saying, no, you are drowning.
And that is the very first step of this discipline of remembrance. You have to stop sanitizing your own history. If you look back at a crisis and say, yeah, it was tricky, but I handled it, you've robbed yourself of the reality. The reality was the water was over your head. You didn't have control.
So we're admitting that we are about to be destroyed. That's the baseline. But then, just when it feels like the water is going into our lungs, the song snaps.
Verse 6. The tone changes completely.
It's the pivot point. Verse 6. Blessed be the Lord, who hath not given us as a prey to their teeth.
We're back to the teeth.
We are. It confirms that the danger was real, the teeth were ready to snap shut, but the outcome was interrupted. And then we get what I think is the most complex and beautiful image in the whole deep dive. Verse 7.
The bird and the snare. Our soul has escaped as a bird out of the snare of the fowlers. The snare is broken, and we are escaped.
Okay, we need to geek out on this for a second because the mechanics of this metaphor really matter.
Please do. I mean, I know what a snare is generally. It's a trap. Right. But think about how a bird snare works. It's not like hunting a lion where you go out and fight it. A fowler, a bird catcher, uses a snare. It's hidden. It's deceptive.
So this isn't the loud, crashing flood anymore. This is silent.
It's the silent threat. The scheme at the office you didn't see coming. The health issue that was growing quietly while you felt fine. And the way a snare works is that it uses the bird's own movement to trap it. The bird steps in, the noose tightens.
So the bird is helpless. Once it's in, it's done for.
Correct. A bird is a fragile creature of hollow bones and feathers. It cannot fight a snare made of wood or wire. It physically lacks the capacity to free itself.
But the verse says the bird escaped, and it says the snare is broken.
Exactly. Look at the grammar there.
Yeah.
It's passive voice. The snare is broken. It doesn't say the bird pecked through the rope. It implies that the bird was trapped, doom was certain, and then something from the outside smashed the trap.
That is, wow, that's a huge distinction. Because if the bird breaks the trap, the bird is strong. But if the trap is broken for the bird is loved, or at least protected.
That's the aha moment. The escape wasn't due to the bird's cleverness or its strength. The intervention happened to the mechanism of the trap itself. And the source material argues this is where we really have to check our ego.
How so?
Well, we love to attribute our survival to our own skills, right? I escaped that financial ruin because I'm a savvy investor. I got over that illness because I have a strong constitution. But Psalm 124 says, no, you were the bird. You were caught. The only reason you are flying free right now is because the snare was broken for you.
It resists the illusion of total control. That's the phrase that popped up in the reading. And we are so obsessed with the idea that we are in control.
We are. We treat God like a co-pilot, who we only ask for help when we need him to hold the map. But this text suggests our dependence is much more fundamental. We aren't the co-pilot. We're the bird that was about to be dinner.
So when we realize that we didn't save ourselves, what does that actually do to us? Because it sounds like it could make you feel hopeless.
Paradoxically, it does the exact opposite. It creates confidence.
Yeah.
But not self-confidence. It creates God-confidence.
Which brings us to the finale of the psalm. The anchor. Verse 8. Our help is in the name of the Lord, who made heaven and earth.
This is where the writer just zooms all the way out. He connects the specific rescue, the broken snare, to the ultimate reality.
Why does he add, who made heaven and earth? Why not just stop at, our help is in the name of the Lord? It almost feels like he's reading off a resume.
Well, think about the threats we just covered. The flood, where's that? On the earth. The bird and the fowler, where's that? It involves the sky and the ground. By calling God the maker of heaven and earth, the poet is saying, My helper is the author of the very environment I'm struggling in.
Oh, I see. So if he built the stage, he can control all the actors on the stage.
Exactly. If the proud waters are threatening you, remember who invented water. If the trap is made of wood and iron, remember who created the trees and the ore. The logic is that the creator has authority over the creation. So if your help comes from him, there is no threat that is above his pay grade.
That's a perspective shift that actually helps with anxiety, because usually my anxiety comes from thinking this problem is just too big.
And this verse answers, but your helper is bigger. It anchors your confidence not in, I hope things work out, but in the very character of the one who made everything.
Okay, so let's pivot this to where the rubber meets the road. We've got this ancient text, we've got floods and birds, but we have listeners right now who are commuting to work or folding laundry. How do we actually do this? What's the modern application?
It comes back to that phrase, the discipline of remembrance. In cognitive behavioral therapy, there's a concept of reframing. You look at the data of your life through a different lens. This psalm is inviting us to reframe our own history.
Because we just tend to move on. We survive the crisis and we delete the file.
Right, we focus on the current problem. What are my bills next month? What about this deadline? We rarely look back at the 10,000 deadlines we've already survived.
So, practically speaking, you're suggesting we need to build a resume of rescues?
I love that term. Yes, a resume of rescues.
What does that look like? I mean, how do you do that?
It means sitting down, maybe literally with a journal, or just on your drive home, and doing an inventory. Ask yourself, when was a time I felt like the waters had gone over my soul?
Okay, so maybe that time I got laid off and I thought for sure I'd lose the house.
Right. Go back to that emotion.
Yeah.
Feel the panic you felt then. And then ask yourself, how did the snare break? Maybe a friend called with a lead. Maybe a check arrived you weren't expecting. Maybe you just found a resilience you didn't know you had.
And acknowledging that that wasn't just luck.
Exactly. When you label it as luck, you feel lucky for a minute. But when you label it as help from the maker of heaven and earth, you build trust. You build a track record. So the next time you get laid off or the next time the waters rise, you aren't starting from zero. You have a database of evidence that says, I have been rescued before.
It strengthens the relationship because you stop seeing yourself as some solo act. You realize you have an invisible support system that has been active the whole time.
And that completely destroys the pride of, I did it myself, but it replaces it with the joy of, I am not alone.
I think that's the key. I am not alone.
You know, in the rush of modern life, the emails, the noise, the pressure, it is so easy to feel isolated, to feel like it's all on your shoulders.
That is the modern condition, isn't it? The burden of self-sufficiency. We are told you are the captain of your soul. And Psalm 124 basically says that's a lot of pressure for a fragile bird.
It's too much pressure. I don't want to be the captain if the ship is sinking.
Right. And the Psalm says you don't have to be, you just have to acknowledge the help when it comes.
You know, we try to make these deep dives practical. We want you to walk away with something you can actually use. And I think this concept of the inventory is so powerful.
It's transformative if you actually do it.
So here's a challenge for you listening. Don't just let this be a nice discussion about poetry. Identify one snare. Just one. Look back at your last year. Was there a moment where you were trapped or the teeth were close?
And look at how you got out. Trace the mechanism of the escape. And ask yourself that lingering question from the text. It's a haunting question, really. If it had not been the Lord on our side, where would we be?
Where would we be? It's a question that demands an answer.
We'd love to help you with more of these practical applications. We actually have a whole breakdown of the discipline of remembrance and some templates for doing that inventory, and it's all available for our community.
Yeah, we dig into the how-to a lot deeper there. It's all about building that spiritual muscle memory.
Exactly. If you want to support what we do and get those resources sent directly to you, please join our mailing list. You can find us at https://bit.ly/practicaladvice.
That's https://bit.ly/practicaladvice.
We'd love to see you there. It really does help us keep the lights on and keep diving into these texts.
Absolutely.
As we wrap up, I just want to leave you with that image of the bird. The snare is broken, the sky is open. You didn't break the trap, but you are free to fly.
That is the definition of grace.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you next time.